pruning day. So this is always a fun class for me. So how many husbands and wives do we have here today? Partners. So who gets mad at who when they prune? So yeah, who's like, will you please put those down and leave my plant alone? Right? That's always a class. So summer's always a great time to talk pruning. Hopefully the weather is usually a little better. We can get someone that's done in the winter. I always do a class in November, kind of going into the winter. We do one in January, kind of talking about what we're working on coming out of winter. And then this is the one where we talk about what do we do now that spring is just about done. What do we need to get done here in the summer to kind of stay ahead for the next season. So everybody found the handouts there. If I got to go make some more if we need that for class. But we'll kind of go through a bunch of stuff here. I borrowed a couple plants from my branches from my yard, so I can show you a little bit. We'll borrow the Japanese maple. My wife said a couple branches had to go anyway. So if I look at any plant, you know, the basics of the pruning cut is really not going to change. We're going to talk about some different ways we prune here. But if we talk about kind of making a proper cut, what do I do? If this branch is hanging off me and I'm the trunk and it's partially broken, or it's maybe you put it 2 feet from the front door and now I can't get into my mailbox, whatever the case is, what do I do? You know, what are my options? I can obviously do what I did, take the whole thing and out. You know, all the way to the trunk, a nice clean cut, it's out of the way, it's done, it's over with, I don't mess with it anymore. Maybe it's, I want to lengthen it back a little bit and shorten the stem, I can do it that way, but I'm not just going to go along and go, oh, well, let me just cut you off and we'll see what happens. What do I got left? I got a stub, I got issues. In the wintertime, you're going to go, ooh, who did that? You know, you're not going to see it as much in the summer, but I'm always going to try to make a clean cut. I'm going to try to get this prune back to right where I have another side branch. You got safety goggles on, right? Just in case. So I'm going to always prune it back to where I have a side branch. That's going to directional, tell that thing where to go. Does that make sense? Yeah. Instead of just, again, lopping it off wherever I want to, which is a lot of times when I see driving around. It's like, take just a second and go, you know what? If I just took that all the way back to there even, today I can tell I pruned that. In a month from now, after this starts to regrow and pattern out, it's going to look just like the same as it did before. But I've gotten myself probably 2 or 3 years back, okay? So things that are trees, you know, typically we're going to talk about heading and thinning back. If it's a plant, I don't want to prune the rhododendron yet. Let's just say we're talking about, this is a twig dogwood. Anybody got twig dogwoods? So any stem, this could be a rose, this could be anything. Right now we're doing a lot of rose deadheading and things. If I'm going to cut this back, I'm going to follow this down the stem as long as I want and try to cut above where I have a set of 2 leaves. If I go flat, it's not the end of the world, but if you can, try to go 45 degrees. Now I don't have rain sitting on that flat cut where I might get a little bit of rot, especially when we do this in the winter. In the summer, it's not quite as important. But I'm going to always try for the one stem that I had going up. Now I'm going to have 2 stems that'll come up and I have a bushier, fuller plant. Okay? So essentially what I just did was, our first type we're going to talk about is heading back. Okay, I'm heading this back. I'm taking a branch. I'm taking this out, I'm heading it back, and I'm telling it, okay, we're going to start regrowing again. So heading back first. You'll see on the tree, I brought a couple branches here so we can see again. If I'm the trunk and I'm looking at this Japanese maple and I'm like, you know what, it's hanging, it's hitting the top of my car on the driveway, which is what this one was doing. But any of this, you know, what do I do? Do I thin it all the way out? By thinning it all the way to the trunk, get it out of there and be done with it? Or do I want to shorten it or head it back? So again, if I look at that branch, I can pick all kinds of areas. You know, I could go back to right there. You know, you can tell I pruned that, but not really. I've got a clean cut in there. I've left this no stub. This branch takes back over and it goes right back to the way it was before. I can go even farther back if I head it back. Same thing. I can see here for a minute that I pruned that, but as these regrow, I'm going to fill in that same shape again, okay? So heading back is usually going to shorten my plant or length of a stem, or it's going to redirect where I want it to grow. Instead of going this way, I'd like you to go back out that way. I can cut to a branch that's going that direction and fix my plant that way, okay? Thinning is where I'm going to look at a plant. Let's use the twig dogwood here again. So if I look at that twig dogwood, No, this is a young one. There's really nothing wrong with it. And of course, we want somebody to buy it, so I'm not going to cut it in half today. But if I look in the center, it's not about this. It's about, I want it to open this up. I want air, I want sun, I want something natural. So I'm going all the way to the base, and I could dig in here and thin some pieces all the way out to the main trunk. And I open up that structure. That's a great way. That's essentially most of the pruning that I do, because I want air, I want sun, I want less disease, all those things. If I have a super twiggy congested plant, I'm probably asking for issues. I'm not getting sun in there, I might get some mildew, other issues like that. So we want to open it up by thinning a little bit, okay? So you'll see there, pinching back, thinning, heading, and shearing. So I'm going to borrow my fancy little, I never thought the guy with huge hands would have these little pruners, but I use them all the time now. So I brought a perennial in because this is something we do a lot in the summertime. With modern perennials, we get flower. We get, if I don't prune this back or deadhead it, what happens? That wants to go to seed, and I shut down the flower a little bit. This particular thing's a little coreopsis that I would literally get flowers on from now all the way until frost in the fall. If I take a minute every couple weeks and just go, okay, we're going to pinch this back and we're going to pull a few flowers out, that tells this plant more bud, more bloom. This could be, you know, hardy fuchsia, this could be cape fuchsia, coreopsis. We can go on with all the perennials that we can use in our yards. And if it's not that I got to walk out and shear it back, we're not doing anything like that. It's just a quick little deadheading or pinching that'll give me more bloom, more thing. If you have geraniums, you know, we do this a lot with annuals as well. If I'm getting too big and leggy, I can pinch that back and I'll have a much nicer compact plant that's going to be full of flowers.
You cut off a decent blossom. Should you wait till they're all shrivelled?
Yeah, I did that for the class.
Okay, so but normally you wait.
Someone will probably still buy this because it's got a few more coming. But yeah, we should, once the flower's spent, that's when I'm going to cut. I look at that and say, oh, it's gotten brown in it, sweet, we'll get it out. I just walked around, I literally counted, my wife was making fun of me. I got 23 containers full of flowers all around the house, patio, deck, porch, wherever, and I didn't think I had that many, but I got a problem, obviously. So, I mean, it's not like we take hours and do this. I was probably 15 minutes, you know, on Wednesday. It was like, oh, haven't deadheaded yet. Let me walk around, a couple geraniums, this gets that, slough a little bit of that off, done. You know, just do it a little bit. It's not every day, it's not every week, but probably every couple weeks we tidy it up. You're going to have, again, more flower power as we go through the season. This isn't something we do, you know, in the fall, the winter, you know, even early spring. This is really a summer deal where we're going to pinch some stuff back and try to get a little more flower and a little nicer plant. The last one there is shearing. This is usually where the husband and the wife might disagree, right? We have the chainsaw and the stick, we have the hedge shears, we got the lopper, we got whatever. What did you just do to my Japanese maple? We're not going to use the chainsaw and the stick, hopefully, and prune a lot of that stuff. But there's a lot of things, you know, we do the new ones here. There's a lot of things we can use our hedge shears on. I have the same pair in my garage. This is the ones from my house. So extendable handles, I can get up a little bit farther, which is nice. These are really light, which I like, aluminum. Very sharp. I can use the same sharpening tool I'll show you here in a minute. But if I have plants that have all kinds of foliage, and the difference is the stems. I look at this boxwood here, and I don't have any room. We look at this twig dogwood, what did I have? You know, about 4 or 6 inches in between spots. If I hedge clip this, it's not going to kill the plant, it's not the end of the world, but what am I going to end up with? Lots of foliage comes out and probably a whole bunch of little dead stubs. And if you're OCD like me, you don't like to look at them. So that's why maybe we hand prune those a little bit. Something like boxwood, I look at that, you know, I've got ½ an inch in between my sets of foliage. So I could shear that back, turn it into an ice cube or a triangle or whatever your geometry tells you to do. And I'm going to have a thicker, fuller plant by shearing back. Is that making sense? So a little bit of shearing, boxwoods, laurels, hedge material, or arborvitae, a lot of that stuff. As long as I don't shear back to bare wood, I'm going to regrow, have a really nice thick hedge or a little specimen or whatever I'm trying to do, okay? So our like I said, our 4 main kinds, we're talking pinching here a little bit in the summer. I love to thin out in the summer. You look at a tree, it's all full of foliage right now. That's just too thick for me. I want to see a little bit more air in there. I want some more light on the garden underneath it. So it's not doing this It's going into the middle and saying, let's get rid of 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 branches, and I open up that structure a little bit by thinning it out. Then we have our heading back, or shearing, which are the same idea, but we're trying to, again, reduce height or change the shape a little bit by doing something like that, all right? So I brought in some of my tools here for the class. We're gonna do a lot of plants here in a second, but in the class, you got 20% off all your tools. So if you need a little freshen up on some new pruners or whatever, it's a great time to grab some stuff. If you're like me, I love everything with bright handles because that way we don't leave them in the yard waste, because I've done that too many times. So at least I can dump it out and find the red handle in there somewhere. So if we kind of look at a couple of tools, you know, you saw my snips. I'll probably leave them here, so I'll put them back in my bucket. We got great little snips by Dram. These are one of the few things we can find kind of made in the USA, at least some of the parts these days. But little snips, you know, little shears, little pruners for kind of small stuff, or perennials, small shrubs, deadheading again, would be a great way to go. Ratchets, anyone tried ratchet pruners? So this is one, if I break the package here, we'll take it out of there, I'll show you. So Zenport makes some wonderful kind of inexpensive tools. If I take the lock off, what's the difference? With this, I click, 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 and a ratchet action. I'm not having to slice all the way through. Sometimes I got huge hands, so it's not an issue yet, although I'm getting old, it will be someday. But this is one that might be a little easier on the wrist, where I can click down and kind of ratchet action versus having to use a regular bypass pruner, okay? So we got ratchet pruners. We got all kinds of bypass pruners. Now again, these are Zenport. You're looking at about 40 bucks, less than 20% for a good quality pair of pruners. Anyone have Felcos? Oh, not one Felco today. So these are my 40-year-old Felcos. I think these are running about 100 bucks these days, and they make them so they look pretty close. But most gardeners, this is going to last you a lifetime if you don't put them in the yard waste. The Felcos of this is literally about 35-year-old pair that I bought way back in the day. The handles will wear off someday, but they still work great. But it's also 100 bucks, and I use them all the time. Here, home, work, wherever, arboretum. So if you want to get a Felco pair, we can certainly order one in for you. But Zenport works really well. You'll see different sizes, kind of depending on what your hand is. And one in particular has got this funky little handle on there. So if we have wrist issues, this will actually, the handle's 360 degrees. So if I clip it, it's going to roll with my wrist, and I don't have to, again, clamp down. So this is a great one for my mother. You know, she's a little bit older, still gardens every day, too long every day. If she's probably watching this, she'll know what I mean. But this is one for her, you know, a little bit, again, easier on the wrist. You know, if you don't have wrist issues, fine, we can use any, but that's just kind of a little extra bonus set to do. One thing I use, you saw me before class, who's got our sharpener already? Because that's the best thing on the property. We go through hundreds of these a year. It's a really easy way to get your tool out. There's the one from my garage. I got a little cap. I can throw some oil in there if I want, or cleaner to clean them as I'm working. I turn it upside down. I got pruners. I can do some simple knives and stuff in the kitchen. But if I have one of these at any time, I can stop and just run this over my blade and get my pruners quick sharpened again. So really easy to do. It used to be, let's pull out the file, let's get the stone, let's get the grinder out. This is a great way to keep them sharp, kind of on a daily use way to go. So sharpener is a great way to go. Probably I got mine in my bucket, but the tool I probably use more than anything is this. So this is a really easy little pocket saw, clips on my belt. You know, to me, this is a surgical tool. Sometimes we get loppers. You know what I mean when I say loppers? And what do? We try to get into the base of a plant, and we're like, how am I ever going to get a clean cut in that thing? Because that's leverage, but I can't ever get that blade sometimes in the right spot if it's a really congested plant. The pocket saw, I can slip in there like a little surgical tool and get a perfect little cut. They're sharp as heck. Be careful as you prune. I've got a couple chunks of fingers over the years with those. But if we get it in there, we can get exactly where we want to cut, get it out of there, and move on, okay? So a small pocket saw, or if we got a little bigger, I got one of those in the pruning bucket too. I need to get a little bit more of a little folding saw. I can open that up and get a little larger branch that way too, okay? And there are places for loppers. I should pass this around because you will not believe, you want to grab that? You will not believe how light that is. That thing looks like a kid's toy. and it actually works really well. I can't believe how many of those we've had people ask for that now. It's 100% plastic, weighs nothing, but it's got a great sharp blade. But for, again, a little lopper, I don't have to use as much leverage. That's a really fun little tool to have. This is the one I use versus the bigger one. You know, we've got kind of the giant lopper. This we call a mini vine lopper. So really high quality tool. These are aluminum, so again, very light. But these are probably the two most common tools sold commercially in the entire United States. This is orchards, berry farms, wineries, all the above. This is what exactly the pruners they're using, because they, again, last forever. We take care of them. Very lightweight, very easy to use. So loppers, and you saw my head shears. I don't do the chainsaw on the stick. Who's got a chainsaw on a stick? Because it does save some time here and there. But I don't have one of those yet. Maybe someday. This is my little head shears. Same thing I use at my house. So lots of great tools, but keep them sharp. You know, make your life easy. The sharper that tool is, the better luck I'm going to have as I'm pruning. If I let them get dull, you're just making more work for yourself. So sharpener, you might have stone grinder, whatever your thing is, that'll keep those things nice and sharp for down the road. The last thing I brought in was my pole pruner. This is a well-used little beauty from my house. So you can see, I mean, that's a pretty substantial tool. This is a couple $100. This isn't a cheap thing to use. But I don't know if anyone have pole pruners? We got a few? I use it, again, probably more than most homeowners in my own yard. I bring it down to the Arboretum a lot and do a lot of pruning down there in Ever as well. I got tired of the rope. You know, the rope up here is what breaks very quickly. So I went chain, which is what I'm paying for, and a much heavier duty pole. I think you would be shocked how big of branches I can cut with this thing. I can use the rope, you know, again, and use it as a regular pruner up on the tree. I can also bolt back on my saw blade and get up there again and do some pretty good cutting. So it's not a cheap tool, but if you're into doing your own, we try to keep a few of these, and there's a little smaller model in there that's pretty good quality as well. And you know, sometimes guys that come prune are not cheap. You know, when you look at that pull, you know, and you're comfortable doing it, it's like, you know what? I'll get myself a good pull pruner, because I could go out there and take care of it myself and not pay that guy $100 an hour to come do the same thing for me with the same tool kind of deal, okay? So if we get into kind of this is always the kind of who, what, why, where, how. So why are we talking about pruning today? You know, we get into the summertime, you know, what's the purpose of why I prune? I would always have a purpose. You know, a lot of times we talk about this in the winter as well. Just because it's a dormant season doesn't mean I have to run out and prune everything in my yard. It's like, oh, well, I was told I got to prune in the winter. Everything's got to get cut back. No, that's not it. Why are you trying to prune? Am I trying to get more fruit? Am I trying to get more berries, more flowers, a better structure? You know, did my neighbor's lawyer send me a letter, said I'm going to sue you because you're blocking my view? You know, there's a whole bunch of reasons to get out and prune, but have a reason is the whole purpose. You know, it doesn't matter, you know, whatever it is, that, you know, that's the reason we're going to get her done. So try to get a reason. To me, a huge one is simply just to improve the shape or the health of the plant. We talked about air circulation, thinning things out, getting better sun. That means happier plants underneath. It means a happier tree or shrub specimen because I don't have the congested twigs. Maybe I got dead wood. Maybe I got diseased wood. All those are great reasons to get that out of there and get some healthy regrowth going. So look at that plant, kind of have a purpose. Why am I standing here about ready to spend 20 minutes of my time doing this? Well, this is why, because it's too big. You know, I don't like the look of it. It's hanging over the walkway. Again, whatever the reason is, that's the reason we would start with that prune, okay?
You forgot to add because it's really fun.
I like pruning. You see, that's a great one. She said because it's really fun. I like to prune. I'll speak for myself. I think it's kind of peaceful. You get out there, not to get all hippie on you, but you kind of stand at that tree and you're like, what are we going to do today, bud? If you let him speak to you a little bit, he'll be like, you know, I don't really want this branch and that's got to go, and now I'm much happier. So you can always go out. So it's a fun little peaceful activity in the yard. If you're like me and you got two young boys, you can get them outside and make them pick up branches too, hopefully. So there you go. So try to have a purpose. Everything does not have to be pruned every season, point blank. And that's one I think a lot of gardeners think, again, oh, it's summer, I got to go cut everything. Or it's winter, I got to go thin everything. No. Have a reason why you're going to do this. So a couple things for me, kind of for knowing your plants. So I'm always watching for disease. If we can catch something early, we can prune it out, we can treat it with the spray, whatever it is, and we can move on. If I let something fester, my little dead branch might become a dead limb, might become a dead tree. I can tell you with the weather, the way it's gone this year is it's raining sideways again here on, you know, what is it, June 15th. I think it's a 4th of July summer year. You know, this is a year to watch for a lot of issues in plants. I've seen a lot of stuff at the nursery I don't really see very often. Got a lot of phone calls from customers. The same plants, everybody, don't feel alone. The same stuff's kind of affecting everybody's yard this year. So from peach leaf curl, the lilac blight, to dogwood anthracnose, I can go on and on and on. Those are all wet issues from the way the spring weather has gone. It's not my fault, your fault, or Mother Nature's fault. I guess it's Mother Nature's fault. We'll blame it on her. So try to watch for that stuff. And again, if I have an issue, I can get it pruned very quickly. Maybe I don't have to go get the bottle of murder, death, kill, and I can get some healthy growth back, and on we go. We are going to dry out here at some point, so at least I hope we do, right? So watch for diseases, bad branches, partially broken stuff, weak limbs. A lot of times you come out of winter, we had some windstorms, you know, is that limb half cracked? Why does it look kind of funky? Let's get it sawed out of there again and get some good growth back. So my big rules today, and this is going to deal with a lot of what just happened the last 3 months, is prune after bloom. When we get into plants here, we start talking rhodie, azalea, and all some of the stuff I brought up. They just finished blooming. This is the time of year to prune them. If I don't, I've missed my opportunity. We don't do this in late summer. We don't do it in the fall. We don't do it in the winter. This is the time of year we got to get that stuff done. So prune after bloom is a great rule to live by. There's very, 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 very few exceptions that I would ever miss with that one. I call it the 1/3 rule, and I'll raise my hand. I've broken that quite a few times, as I'm sure many of you have. But I would never try to go more than 1/3 of the height or 1/3 of the spread in a season. So if I have bought a house and I got a crazily overgrown shrub, okay, let's go back a little bit this year, let it regrow. Next year we go a little farther, we could probably get that thing back into shape, okay?
Does that apply to roots?
I would never probably take 1/3 of, well, you could take 1/3 of the roots on a lot of plants. Yeah, it'd be about the same. Yeah, about the same. So 1/3 rule. Now, having said all that, the right plant in the right spot is the way to go. You know, if you inherited something or you planted something in a spot in your yard and you're having to walk out and cut it severely back year after year after year, it's your plant, it's your call, but I'm telling you that's more work and it's probably not the right plant in the right place. You know, we need to get something a smaller scale, that grows slower, a different cultivar, something we don't have to go hack back quite as much every season as well, okay? So one huge thing I'm hoping everybody's going to understand is that next point there, old wood versus new wood bloom. Do you guys kind of know when I say that, a few? Well, we have to pay attention to that in our plants because that dictates everything. That to me is the #1 rule with everything in your garden. If I look at something like a rhododendron, you know, most people have rhododendrons in here. We got any rhodie haters? Don't feel alone. I know there's a few that don't like them. But if I grab this rhodie, hold on one second here. So I brought one in here. This is an Anna Rose Whitney, right? I picked this on purpose because it's almost done blooming. I've got new growth already coming out. Okay, this plant just bloomed. Okay, rhododendrons are old wood bloomers. So what happens is this summer, these come up, I feed it, I water it, I get a flower bud, a flower bud, a flower bud. That is set in the summer to fall that opens next year. Okay, that's an example of an old wood plant. So what happens if I walk out in September? Like, oh, I forgot to prune my rhodie. Let me give you a little tidy. Probably not going to kill the plant, but I've just cut off all my flowers for the next season. Does that make sense? We can say the same thing about a lilac. You know, I brought a lilac in here. If my lilac just bloomed and I enjoyed the fragrance and I'm going to prune it, now is the time. If I go out in the winter, I can tidy it, I can clean it up, I can get rid of crossing branches, I can do all that. But if I want to cut it back or head it back, and I go out and do that in January, I just cut off all my flower buds, okay? And we can talk trees, flowering cherry, crabapple, plums, dogwood, everything that we have enjoyed in flower here for the last 3 months in the Northwest spring bloomed on what grew last year. If I'm gonna prune, I'm doing it now or even a month ago. When it's done blooming, that's when I can get in and do my pruning. The branches come back out, I got healthy growth, those set flower buds, and I get to enjoy that the next season, okay? So that's old wood, yes?
So question, I know this is pruning, but if you were to deadhead the road,
Yep.
and you pinch those
Yeah.
back, if they've already got the little spikes
Yep.
coming, are those flowers or are they leaves?
So those are leaves. My flower buds will be set at the top of every one of these, okay? And we're gonna do the rhodie here. We're gonna do some pruning here in just a minute. I'll show you. So that's an example of old wood. Now if we go the opposite and we talk about new wood, those are new brainers. So I brought up one here as an example. Who's got spirea? That's a great shrub. I got these all over different places in my yard. So what have you done with your spireas in the past? I can do kind of whatever I want with this, honestly. So my spirea right now in my yard, say the one down the bank, I'm about 3 feet by 3 feet covered in flower buds. It's going to go into full bloom here in June and early July. Now, when you came by my house in February, it was a little clump of twigs about 6-8 inches tall and a foot across. And I've already grown up with colorful leaves. I bloom. That's a new wood blooming plant. There's a lot of plants like that. I could cut back as far as I want. Maybe I want this spirea bigger. Okay. Don't cut it back as much coming out of winter. You know, then we're going to have a little larger scale plant. I'm still going to get flower that way. So there's some things that we point, even if you never know, ask. You know, ask me, we'll do a bunch of questions at the end. You know, hey, was this a new wood bloomer? Is that an old wood bloomer? Because that to me dictates everything. The timing of the pruning and how quick I'll get recovery. And some plants, you know, as an example like spirea, I love doing this one in June because, we should say this, who doesn't like flowers? Yeah, nobody's going to raise their hand. So I get full bloom on this. I got beautiful colored leaves. This is one called Magic Carpet, okay? So this blooms here, and about a month from now when it's done, my flowers are turning brown. I'm like, I don't want to look at that the rest of the summer. I grab my hedge clippers, and I cut in just below that, 4 or 6 inches back, and you probably, the husband or the wife comes out, what have you done to my spirea? And you're like, just wait, give it about a few weeks here, and I get spring again. I got brand new growth comes out, more flower buds, and I have a whole nother season of bloom, you know, with a lot of plants that bloom on new growth. So you can almost double your flowering every year by doing a quick little prune here after they bloom in that late spring, early summer. Yes?
Would you feed it again?
I would always say feed it. You know, spirea is not a huge heavy feeder, but absolutely. I mean, that's going to give you better growth, quicker bloom, all the above. So a little bit of food will always help. If you've been in my other classes, we always talk kind of about maybe 2 feedings a year on typical landscape plants. Everything, rhodie, azalea, all the above. We feed coming out of winter. I got happy plant through the spring. We get our bloom, and then we do it again mid-May, mid-June, somewhere in there, because that's going to help us with that summer push. And then we got, again, happy plants for the next season, okay? So old wood bloom, new wood bloom is a huge thing you got to think about as you're looking at any plant. Should I prune this now? Should I wait? How far should I do it? All those questions you ask yourself, you can always call and ask if you don't know, or pull out the fancy phone, we might tell you these days too. You probably ask Siri, right? Siri, should I prune my forsythia right now? And she'll probably tell you. I think she's programmed. But you can always ask, because it does matter. And again, a lot of things we can get double bloom out of or get right back in cycle for the next season, okay? So, what are we going to kind of talk about today? What do we want to look to prune here in the summer? If I'm planning out my time, hopefully on a nicer day today, and I want to get out and get some of this done, you know, what are the things that I would probably mark on your calendar to try to get here in the coming weeks? Now, again, the basic definition of pruning is probably what? I want to cut something back to encourage new healthy growth, more flower, and another cycle, right? So we're always going to get, by pruning, we're always going to get new growth. So that should tell you, you know, I've got probably 2 months here. If we start to get into later August, September, that's the only time of the year I really avoid all pruning, because I'm going to encourage fresh growth. We're too close to winter. Doesn't have a chance to grow up, harden off, and then I tend to get frost damage. I see it every year driving around neighborhoods. I live in Everett, driving to work up here. I see it all over the place with hedges, laurels, you know, viburnum, all kinds of plants that people think they run out in September. Ooh, let me get my last little OCD prune done. And it's a little late, because now we get a cold snap like we do pretty much every year in December. Now we got black foliage, we got dieback. Does it kill the plant? Typically not, but now I got to go back and do it again coming out of winter. So if I miss my opportunity here in the summer, okay, put the hedge clippers away and come out after frost in the spring. We can do the exact same thing again, okay? So watch your timing a little bit.
So you're saying that everything you talked about today we can do in the next couple of weeks?
Oh yeah, do it now. We probably got, I always kind of tentatively mark like 1st of August on my calendar. If I get into August, I'm like, I don't know. If I prune my rhodie that late, I probably don't have enough summer left to set a lot of flower buds. I need to get those done here more like late June, early July, and I'll be happy, okay? So evergreens and hedges, number 1. Now I pulled out the boxwood. We kind of talked about it. This could be Japanese holly, this could be laurel, this could be a zillion different easy broadleaf evergreen things we do. If I go out and do this in the fall, too close to winter. So right coming out of winter, say 1st of April until about midsummer, that's my opportunity to walk out and turn this into the box or prune it back a little bit or let it go. It's up to you. Some people like a little taller hedge here and there. But those are my opportunities to get. I never cut to bare wood. Again, I'm taking a chance that won't regrow. So typical plants, this is evergreen, right? So people probably realize evergreen doesn't mean it's evergreen forever. That's 3 years. I hold my leaves for 3 years, then that old growth kind of starts dropping out of the middle as the new growth replaces it. So if I wait, I let this boxwood grow for the next 5 years and now I'm this wide and I'm like, well, wait a minute, I want to go back to the way you were before. I'm probably past the point of no return then. But if I do a light little pruning every year or every other year, I'll have a nice, super dense, healthy plant that'll serve my purpose what I want in the yard, okay? So hedges, this could be boxwood, it could be anything evergreen that we kind of hedge, the arborvitaes included. Most people have the little green soldiers, a little living fence. I can shear those, I can top them, I can do whatever I want if I want to tidy them up, but again, I can't cut too far in, especially side to side. If I get to bare wood, you're probably not going to have it regrow a little bit. I've done it by accident a couple times on my hedge. It's like, all right, well, that's going to take a while. I cut too far in a branch, so we either got to let something else cover it up because it won't re-sprout. We might as well take that branch all the way back to the trunk, okay? So hedges is a big one. I brought in a couple of mine. I've already done a few of my Japanese maples. I have way too many. But this is the time of year, again, I could head it back if I wanted, but I'm not ever interested in topping trees quite as much. It's more, again, the center. How can I thin this out and open it up a little bit? It's a great time here when we get sunny day, probably not today, but to walk out here early summer and look at the structure and go, you know what, I could get up in there and take 1 branch, 2 branch, 3 branches out, and I've opened up that whole structure for a little more daylight and a little happier tree down the road, okay? So thinning trees out is a great way to go. Sometimes protecting your fruits and berries, especially if you have young ones. I think we got a lot of bloom when we flowered on our fruit trees this year, which means a lot of fruit development. I might look at a branch, it's way too young and have way too many apples on there, and what's going to happen is they start to mature, I'm going to break. It happens a lot on pears, I'll tell you right now, if you've got Asian pear or pears. So I'm not interested in pruning off all my fruit. That's not what I'm saying. But I look at some clusters on there. It might be like, you know what? I got 5 big apples on that spur. I should probably take a couple of them off and reduce the weight. You're going to see your limbs like pop right back up. The same thing with Japanese maples even. Too much foliage. Take a little thinning. I'm going to see it get right back off the ground and get back to the structure that I wanted to have. Okay? So rhodies, azaleas, pieris. All of our spring bloomers. Now, we had a rhodie here I brought in, and again, this is Anna Rose Whitney, which will be a big one. This is a big old-fashioned one, probably get me up, an old plant of this, and get me a 6-8 foot, 6-8 foot specimen. So somebody already asked, what do I do? Now, deadheading is not necessary, okay? Now, if you're OCD like me, I already walked around and deadheaded everything that was done. So it's up to you. The flowers last for, say, a month, and you can leave it on here. It's not going to hurt the plant. It's not going to help the plant. It's totally up to you on what you want to do. But if I'm going to deadhead, I can simply reach in there, even a few weeks ago, and pinch out the sticky flower tresses, put them in the garbage, the yard waste, and I'm done. This one luckily had a 1, or I wouldn't be here a while. But you can see my flower bud again. Old wood bloom last year. When it's done blooming, I get 3, sometimes even more new stems come up. Every one of these is going to get a flower bud, and now I've raised my bloom next year by 4, a factor of 4, or 3, or whatever sets a new growth you got. So if I'm going to prune this, I could deadhead it if I want, or I could simply do this and go, you know what, you're done blooming. I want you to grow a little slower and steadier. So I could go down, sorry about this, buddy. But I could go down here below where my flowers were, and I could snip these off and shorten this up a little bit. Someone promised we're going to buy this one now, right? Yeah, half off. Half the plant, half off. So I could do that in 2 seconds, and I did do a couple of this on a few of mine in my own yard because again, I'd rather have slow and steady. See, that's the nurseryman's rule. Whatever branch you prune has the tag on it. Now I got to take it back out. So, you know, again, does that look very pretty today? No. But I've cut down some height. I've got myself a whole nother year from where it was, and the same thing is going to happen. All these little buds are going to come up, and I'm going to have a little bit shorter, but a nice full plant with maximum flower bud set. It's not going to change anything at all. So I don't have to do that. I could deadhead, I can not deadhead, you can prune, you don't have to prune. It's totally up to you. But I wouldn't look at your rhodies as a thing like, okay, we have to stay really tall or we bury the garage. I mean, that's pretty much what I see around. Everyone's going to prune it into a little tiny thing or just let it go, you know, and turn into a tree. I've taken plenty and done the opposite. You know, I've got a rhodie in my front yard, probably 15 feet tall, 20 feet across. And it's absolutely beautiful. Twisted trunks, I have a whole garden underneath it in the shade. But when I bought the house 20 years ago, it was like, that's staying, but I'm taking all this garbage off from the ground up and getting it up where I can walk underneath it. I got bird houses, all kinds of cool stuff underneath there. So it could be a small tree, or I could keep it pruned back a little bit, keep it as a shrub, totally up to you. But if I'm going to do it, it's now. We feed it, we prune it, we get our bud set, and we get to enjoy the flowers again in 2025 at this point, okay?
So on the rhododendron, anywhere within that third that you can take off,
Yep.
you can just...
And I'll be honest, that's probably the plant I've broken the 1/3 rule the most on. I mean, I'll just be brutally honest. I've taken rhodies from here, like, you know what, I'm done with you. We're going down to here, and we're going to see what happens. And most of the time, you know, you're probably, that's when the wife or the husband walks out, dude, what did you do to my rhododendron? Which my wife did one year. Said, just wait, honey, it'll come back. And now it's a much nicer looking plant, you know, especially again, if you're inheriting somebody else's problem, that may be the way to go. And again, wrong rhodie in the wrong place. If you got too much shade and you planted a sun one there and it's all creeping out sideways leggy, I don't have an answer for you to fix that. You know, some pruning will help it look a little better, but it's not going to magically turn into a nice, thick, beautiful little plant because it's in the wrong place. Same thing with the shade versus sun. I got it out in the sun and needs shade. It's always got sunburn or some issue with it. Well, I can't fix that either. That's not a pruning thing. It's a location kind of deal. So rhodies, you know, again, part of it is always picking the right plant for the right place. I don't need 8 feet. Well, sweet, don't buy Anna Rose Whitney. Let's go get a different pink that doesn't get as big. You know, or I have sun. Let's go get a good variety that lands in sun, and you're not going to have the issues with it long term. Okay? Now, to me, even more important. Yes, go ahead.
Well, what about like something that hasn't been pruned in, say, 5 years?
Yep.
And there's a lot of dead leaves.
Yep. Always clean out the dead, the broken, the weak, the we'll keep going on. The weak, the weary, all the above. Get it out of there anytime you see it. I mean, if I got dead branches, I can always look up in any plant and go, I got no leaves on those. Just break them out of there, get them out of the plant. And again, I'm just opening it up, for issues. Okay. So there's rhodie. Here's azalea. So who prunes their azaleas? I mean, a few. I do. Most of mine. It doesn't mean that I grab, where's my hedge clippers? Doesn't mean that I necessarily grab my hedge clippers on an azalea and do this and turn it into a little ball. It's very easy, and I do some like that, for sure. You know, it depends on what your taste is. A lot of people see azaleas in magazines and pictures, whatever, and they're like, God, I don't even see the leaves when that's in bloom. They're super dense and beautiful. That's from pruning. There's nothing wrong with letting this azalea continue to grow naturally and have a little bit more maybe of a woodland look. It's not quite as dense. It's a little more open. There's nothing wrong with that if that's what you want. I do both in my yard. I've got some I leave alone. I have other ones like, you know what? I want dense, compact, nice, easy, full bloom. I don't turn them into ice cubes or circles, and I don't usually shear them entirely, but whether I grab my hand pruners and go along here and do a little bit of that, That's fine. I could speed this up. We're gonna sacrifice one so I can show you. So if I do this, you're gonna go, what have you done to my azalea? And then you'll fire me, right? No, I'm just you know, but this is a plant, I'm telling you, people that do this and are okay with that look for just a couple weeks, oh, we gotta get that side too. Okay. So I'm telling you right now, if I put this plant aside and I said, come back and see me in a month and look at how much different this looks, this would be a spectacular, super dense, much lower azalea. We're gonna bloom 6 times as heavy next spring. So every one of those little buds, every single one of those branches I cut off of there's one flower bud on each, right? I got rid of the one, now I'm gonna have 3 or 4 for every one of those I just cut. So when I drive around and I see this, like I do this with my Hino Crimson. Anyone got Hino Crimson? So it blooms really early. You don't even see the leaves when they're flowering, and the plants are super healthy. This does not ruin them. It does look bad when I prune it, like you got a piece of wood, you got this. All of this is gonna regrow growth, and I will have a beautiful, dense little plant, okay? Yes?
What if it's like a 40-year-old azalea?
Yeah,
and
so-
it's 3 feet across?
Yeah, so we're not gonna be able to cut that far back on old plants. If we start this when they're a little bit younger, we can. You still could prune yours back a bit and get it more dense, because again, azalea is kind of like our boxwood. If I look at a stem of this, and I really look, I'm gonna find buds all over that wood, and I might even cut, you know, that off right there, and you go, well, you cut that far back. You told me not to cut that to bare wood. But I'm telling you right now, in a couple weeks, here comes green, here comes growth, and that will have foliage and then set flower buds for next year, okay? I'm not gonna cut it off of the trunk. I might lose that plant, but not quite that far. Yes?
So, I don't know if this is working out right, but I kind of like the sheared look because the ones I've seen really have a lot of bloom.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure.
So, if you cut it right after bloom,
Exactly.
it's time to shear it. When do you stop cutting it back?
Oh, you should only have to do this once a year. This would be, my Hinos bloomed back in mid-March, you know, or late March. I already did them. So the flowers were done, they turned brown. I'm like, okay, I could sit here and try to rake all the flowers off of there. I could let it sit either way, or I could just give it its nice little haircut and get rid of most of that debris. Mine has already set up new leaves, and off we go again. I mean, it looks better than it did before.
So what time?
One time a year is plenty. You should, rhodies and azaleas and all this spring blooming stuff should be one time a year. We should not ever have to go back. Again, if I go out in July, August, September, the winter, and I cut those plants back, I cut off my flowers. And I don't ever want to prune evergreen late in the season anyway, okay?
You know, like a chrysanthemum, you keep cutting it back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Chrysanthemum's a little different because we keep
Yeah,
pinching
that's
those
what I'm
to
kinda
keep them
curious,
dense.
so it's
Yeah.
not the same.
Yeah, a little bit different. Yeah.
If you're cutting back the azalea like that, it's not going to rebloom again this year. That's for next year.
Okay, so here's a caveat to that. So everyone heard, she asked about, it's not going to bloom again this year. No, but there's a lot of azaleas I see on the market now, a few that we carry too, that bloom twice a year. So Encore, I don't think it's very hardy up here. I wouldn't do those, but we get double shot. We get one called Perfectamundo. I got a dumb name, but it's a nice azalea. So those azaleas bloom just now, and it still doesn't change the fact if I'm going to prune it, I'm doing it now because it's going to reset flower buds and bloom again in August and September. I'm not going to prune after that bloom, but I would prune after the spring bloom. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay.
What about deciduous azaleas?
So there's a great question, deciduous. It's the same exact story because I just finished blooming on those. If I'm going to cut them back, I'm going to do it now. So a lot of time we cut it back, we regrow, we set flower buds, and then again, we're right back in business for 2025.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, just anything just bloom. Pieris. Who's got Pieris? Lily of the Valley, the little dangling white, pink, red flowers that come out. Nice new growth color. See, again, we could have gone back, you know, 2 months ago probably from now, and we're past frost. When those were done blooming, I could cut them back. If you haven't, it's still not too late. If you've already got all the red new leaves out on Mountain Fire, for example, or all the colorful foliage, I could go back still and cut down below that. I'll still get more colorful leaves that come back out, and I'll still have time to set my flower bud. I always like Pieris because I can walk out in September, see the branch tips, and see those little flower buds just sitting there waiting for the next season. So that's another great example of, again, an old wood blooming plant. We get a little more action flow, okay? So rhodies, azaleas. I'm gonna talk a little bit about who's got heather. So I don't have any heath left. You know, we got the Irish and we got the Scots, right? So this is our Scotch heather we call Coluna, okay? And then we have the heaths. So those are the Irish plants, the ericas, that you see bloom November, December, January, February, March, all through the different times of the winter, right? That always comes in, we'll have hundreds of them again in the fall. But either one I have, the people I hear complain about heather, and we're gonna do lavender next, because it's the same complaint, is why does my heather look like crap in 5 years? It gets all woody, I call it the donut. I get a little donut of foliage and all the flower, and I got a woody center. So how can I avoid that? Just a quick little light clip. It'll take you 5 minutes after it blooms. If I take this foliage back, this Coluna, this blooms in the summer here in about a month, I could cut back below my flowers and kind of clip this off. I'm gonna have a much denser plant that's nice and full, and again, maximize my flower for the next season again as it blooms. The ericas should be like an April thing. You know, if you've got those winter blooming heaths, as soon as we get out of winter, my flowers are all browned out, we cut down a couple inches below that level, we have a leaf back out, we got a super nice dense plant that we don't have to mess with long term. Heather is the perfect example. If I let this grow for 5 years and I got a bunch of wood and a little frosting of foliage on top, now I'm stuck. You know, I really can't go down and cut to bare wood. I might as well just dig that plant up and replace it. But I hear a lot of people complain about heathers, and the other one's lavender here in a minute we'll do next, that just don't prune them. If you wait a number of years and then try to catch up, it just doesn't work with those plants. If I take a couple minutes each season or every other year, I can keep them down, keep them nice and bushy, and maximize my flower, again, doing it that way.
Our erica still has blooms on it?
Yeah.
So
Yep.
it's still wait till after?
Yeah, wait till after bloom. Yeah, you still got plenty of summer. So this is a lavender. This is actually a light colored one. Who is this? Coconut ice. How good does that sound? A little coconut ice lavender. So it doesn't matter what kind of lavender it is. I'm hoping it's English or French, because Spanish is not very hardy here. The ones with the little rabbit ears on top, those pretty much die every winter. It's a little too wet, a little too cold here. So English and French. So this is in bloom. I'm not going to cut this because we want to cut the flowers off. But the lavender is the same exact story as the heather. When I'm coming out of winter time, I'm always going to clip my lavender back a little bit. Okay, keep it dense. I want my lavender to look like squim, or like my 9-year-old says, sequim, right? Sequim. The Sequim Lavender Festival over there. I want big, thick pin cushions. I don't want wood. I drive by a lady's house down here every day on the way home that has wood about 3 feet off the ground, a little frosting of flowers on top. I was like, well, that's her thing, that's fine. I'm guessing it's probably not her thing, and she just doesn't know how to cut them back. So cut them back coming out of winter, and then every time these are done with the bloom, you know, this plant, these blooms are all browned out, I'm cutting halfway into the foliage here and clipping this off. Now I get more bud, more bloom comes back up, and I have a nice, dense, low plant. If I skip this for 5 years and I got wood, now how do I go back to the way that it was before? That's always the question. Sometimes with lavender, we can get away with cutting an older woody plant back in spring and it will get going again. But the point is, if it's gotten to that point, past the point of no return, you know, bite the bullet, cut it back. If it comes back, great. If it doesn't, all right, I'm gonna go get myself a new lavender, and now I know how to keep it season to season. Whether you harvest the blooms and bring them in, or you just want to maximize your flower, the bees will love you because they love hanging out on these all summer, okay? Yes?
We planted those last year.
Yep.
I didn't cut them back for the
Okay.
spring. Is it still too late?
Well, and I don't know if, you know, a newly planted plant should be okay for a season. So it's not too late. If they're in bloom, don't enjoy your flowers. But you can wait another few weeks. Midsummer gets a flush of flower. The flowers are done. Then you can go ahead and prune it then.
And
Yeah.
then again.
Then again,
very early.
coming out of the next winter, and then the next, you can always do. Lavender might be twice a year. You know, a quick little twice a year thing. Coming out of winter after the first bloom cycle, and that'll keep my flowers going a little longer in the season. Okay.
So when do we harvest the flowers this year?
Well, if you got buds out right now, I can harvest these right now. I mean, you can harvest them. There's your pruning. You know, really right there. Just prune it off. Take your lavender in.
Smelling real good.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, you do that all at once. Yes.
Are you saying that if I prune it, it'll bloom again this summer?
All the lavender should go through a couple cycles a
Oh,
year,
really?
if not 3. Yeah, absolutely. Especially when we start to get some sunshine, warm it up a little bit. Yeah. Okay?
Okay.
So what else did I bring in here? We got rhodie, we got azalea, we did our 2. I usually hear from the lavender and the heather haters at some point in the class. We talked about spirea again. I think that's a great example of something to please cut it back. You'll double your flowering on that a little bit. I brought this one in as a, anyone know what that is? Pick it up so you can see. Pretty leaves, right? Anyone know abelia? Okay. So this is a good example of something I would never prune here in the summer because knowing your plants are everything. So what is this plant? This blooms late summer, fall. So this is an example of something I'm going to enjoy the foliage of all through the summer, watch it bloom, leave it alone, and then I cut that back coming out of the next winter. Does that make sense? So be careful before you're, so I'm saying, doesn't mean we have to prune everything in the yard in every season. We walk out and we're tidying everything and then you're like, wait a minute, I usually got some cool flowers on in the fall. Where'd my flowers go? We just cut them off. So we want to leave these alone, let them bloom, and things like abelia or some of these plants that bloom a little later, we hit those in spring. Hydrangea is a great example. Don't ever cut your hydrangea back in the fall, in the winter. That's a March thing. We wait till the next season. Now we can tidy it up and off we go for another year, okay? So deadhead, yes, perhaps, but pruning back, we would wait on some of that stuff till a little bit later, okay? So we did the coreopsis, and again, I love bringing in some of these modern perennials because I think the point that man has done is make these like annuals. You know, we won't have to waste our money as much on annual flower after flower after flower if we choose the right perennials and we deadhead and pinch back a little bit here during this late spring, early summer, midsummer time. We just keep the flowers coming. Okay, and there's a lot of good examples of those these days out in the perennial tables. Now, if we look at some conifers, okay, now we do Christmas wreaths here in the winter. Who comes down and makes a Christmas wreath? Anyone come down and feel all holiday joy? Yeah, see, I do too. That's a fun time. So, yes, I go out in the winter and prune some branches. Conifers are super hardy. We're not hurting anything. But if I have some of this stuff in my yard, there's a lot of question on when do I prune this? What do I do with my pine? What do I do with my arborvitae? All these conifers that we have. So if we look, I brought a couple up here. If we look at conifers in the entire globe, it really comes down to 2 types of plants. What we call whorl, W-H-O-R-L, not world, but whorl conifers. Think of your Christmas tree. What do I got? I got a central straight trunk, and I have concentric rings or whorls of branches. I got my Christmas tree, you know, like that. That's a Norway spruce. I brought that up because you can see into it. That conifer on the ground there is exactly that. Well, I'm not going to top it. I ruined my shape. If I take the top out, now I've got a funky plant for all eternity. That just keeps going, slow and steady, and I get my majestic evergreen. If the other type is what we call random branch conifers. So if I look at this yew right here as an example, or arborvitae, I didn't haul a big hedge one in, but I look at this has got a great name, Mr. Bowling Ball. It's just like a Mr. Bowling Ball. I actually have this one on my patio. It looks like 3 big bowling balls, a little hedge on the side. So this is kind of like our boxwood we talked about. If I look at a plant like that, I look at the stem of that conifer, what's the difference? I can see little side branches, but I've got a lot more room in between them. You can see the tree like that. I look at a plant like juniper, yew, arborvitae, hemlock, cypresses, a lot of the evergreens we use here. I've got so many buds on those stems, I don't maybe have to spend an hour going, oh, well, you know what, I'm going to do that, and there's one there. I don't have to do that. I can grab my hedge clippers again, or my chainsaw on the stick, if you like, and we can just round that off to keep it a little tighter. It's up to you. We don't have to, but that's probably the advantage of the yew, the juniper, the arborvitae. They're very prunable. And again, it doesn't change the fact, like some other plants we talked about, I let this grow for 10 years, it gets as big as me. I'm like, well, wait a minute, I missed the boat. I want to go back to a foot tall. We're done. We cannot do something like that with a conifer. It's every year a little bit, or maybe every other year we do a little bit, and we can keep it much tighter and much smaller that way, okay? So never prune to bare wood either way, but sometimes this is going to make my better hedge, you know, a little better foundation plant. Something, again, I think for most gardeners might be a little easier pruning job. If I look at my spruces, my pines, my real firs, again, all of our Christmas trees, there's certainly a lot of great dwarf ones we don't have to worry about. But if I take that Norway spruce and I'm like, I'm just going to keep it at 4 feet, I take the top out, it's not going to look good. If I wait 5 years and let that branch grow out and block my front door and go, wait a minute, I want to go back to the way it was, it's not going to look good. So a little bit, Christmas trees still get pruned, there's no different with that. But if I look at a plant like that, I can tip it and keep it a little tighter, I can control the spread, but I'm never going to top it, and I'm not going to wait years and then try to cut into bare wood. If I'm cutting to bare wood again, cut the whole branch out. It's not going to change. We can limb it up, you know, walk underneath it as it gets old. There's a lot of options on how to do that, but I'm going to do a little bit every year and not that much. A great example of something like that where you can see maybe a little more is a pine. Who's got pine trees in their yard? Anybody got pine? So again, we've got cool little small pines. We have gigantic 40-foot pines. You know, it depends on what species you're talking, but they all grow the same. What happened last month? My little candles came out and I started to get my new growth. Some of them might be a foot candle. Okay, that's growing a lot faster. It's going to get big. Other things like this little Japanese white pine, I've just got a few inches. It's a lot slower, a lot steadier. But if I'm going to prune this, I could even go back a month ago and I could clip the candles in half. I could pinch the candles off, perhaps even, if I wanted to really keep it down. Don't do that every year, but every other year I could pinch some candles off if I want to control it. This is one I'm not going to prune because this is probably a, you don't want to know how much that is. So how's that? So it's a great little plant, but again, something like this I buy because I probably don't have to prune it. If I buy a different species of pine and I want a tree, okay, again, I'm never taking the leader out of it or it's going to ruin the shape, but I can control the spread a little bit, and by picking the right pine, I probably have a nice conifer or a spruce or whatever tree that I can enjoy in the landscape on a manageable size for a long time, okay? So candles on pines, it's the same idea on the spruces, all those things out there. If you're ever wondering, because we are the evergreen state, right? Everybody's got a lot of evergreens around here. And again, Douglas fir, hemlock, we can go natives, we got western red cedar. If you guess, what do you think I could do with my cedar? You know, that's like arborvitae. I could shear my cedar, I could cut it back a little bit, I could control it, not that you probably will forever, but you can do things like that where I probably couldn't get away with that on a fir, a spruce, a pine, okay? It's a little bit different, yeah.
If you pinch the candles off, will that cause it to branch out to make a little fuller?
It will cause it to branch out, and again, we talked about this with the rhodie. Everyone hears that word evergreen and thinks that because this needle came out, I'm going to have it for all eternity, right? So evergreens are 3 years. I look at a pine, 1 year, it's good. 2nd year, good. 3rd year, I'm okay. After that, all of it is shedding out in the summertime. People call the time here, August, September, what's wrong with my tree? I got needles turning brown and dropping out of the center. That's Mother Nature. That's the way it should be. We rake those up, we use them for mulch, do what you want, and we move on, okay? But having said that, like he asked, if I pinch the candles off of this year after year after year, eventually I'm going to have no more growth. So this is not something I do every year, but probably every other year. I have a blue form of this Japanese white pine in my front yard, and it's every other year for me. I've got it sculptured, cloud pruned. 1 year, let the candles come up, cut them in half. Next year, I can pinch them off, and that way I'm able to keep it really slow and really steady. I mean, you see really well done sculptured pines. We got monster trunks, right? And a really beautiful sculptural piece that might be 7, 6, 7, 8 feet tall is all. If I hadn't done that, I'd probably have myself a 25-foot tree by now. So we can kind of bonsai or torture some of this stuff into a really cool little landscape specimen by clipping the candles again, okay? So evergreens is a tough one. I want to make sure, because I think we all have arborvitae as our living fence. We all got juniper, yews, all the stuff we're talking about. and it's really matters kind of how you shear certain things. Some things we wouldn't want to be as aggressive with, or we're gonna ruin the shape. Okay.
And
Which-
when are you doing that with the evergreens?
So we could do that anytime. And again, I could go back, you know, even a month or 6 weeks ago. With the pine, it's always May. You know, I get in there in May. You're always going to have your candles coming up. You know, again, for me, sometimes it's just clipping these in half even. Instead of getting that much new growth, I got that much new growth, and I could keep it a little slower and a little steadier. A lot of people have Mugo pine. Everyone knows Mugo pine. Everyone asks for Mr. Magoo pine around here, right? Mr. Magoo. So that's our shrub. It has nothing to do with the leader. I'm not going to ruin it. That's a plant I would absolutely shear all of the candles back lightly every year. You have dwarf Mugo pine, which in essence is really like this big. And you drive around and you see Mugo pines that tall, that's because they've been cared for. We can keep it much smaller and much tighter that way. Okay? Yes?
We have a number of well-established mountain hemlocks.
Uh-huh.
Can I not limit up, but there's a couple branches that are laying on the ground?
Oh yeah, yeah. Always can limb up very, very easily. Anything is not going to mind. Again, she asked about limbing up. If I've got a branch I don't want, it's too low, don't cut it in half. Go all the way to the trunk, get a clean cut, and get it out of there, because I've just opened it up a little bit more and I got my healthy growth back.
So it's okay to do that now?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yes.
We've got an Atlas cedar.
Yep.
That's getting brown needles.
Yeah. Okay, so that's a two-part question. So let's see, how can we do this quick? So Atlas cedar, the problem is called needle blight. And I don't know what happened about 7-8 years ago in our little western Washington corner of the world. Every single Mediterranean type cedar gets that needle blight. So that really has to be cleaned out, and you need to get that sprayed. If we don't, I could show you across the street about 2 of them in the neighbor's house here that I think are going to have to probably go to the compost heap in the sky here pretty quick. And these aren't young plants. These are old specimens that have been here forever. So one thing you can do, it's again, always location. If I tuck a Atlas cedar into shade, you're asking for that needle blight because it's not getting warm and dry. If it's out in sun, they're usually okay. But some pruning and thinning, air circulation, better sun, you're going to have less luck. But I would get it pruned and sprayed right away, and I would absolutely this fall find one day where it's not raining, you know, late October, mid-November on a sunny fall day, and get a spray on it then too, protect you for the winter time.
Okay.
Yeah. Don't feel alone, because that is everywhere. Literally on your way out of here, stop at the stop sign for a second. Hopefully no one's behind you honking. Look up to your right, you'll see the 30-footer and the neighbor's yard's got it, and right across the street there's a big old weeping one, same exact problem. Yeah, it's everybody's got it these days. Yeah, on that. So the last one I didn't bring, so who's got lilacs? You know, and again, this is like lilac, we could talk smoke tree, you know, you call it lilac bush, I call it a lilac tree, you call it a smoke bush, I call it a smoke tree. How are you pruning it? That's probably how you're gonna take the size of it. Lilac is always one I bring up. I love mine. I got some old ones I inherited. There's some dwarf lilacs, totally different creatures. We don't probably have to prune as much now. But if I want traditional French, big flower lilac that smells great, I want to bring it inside as a cut flower, this is what it is. So these just finished blooming here in May, right? My growth has come up. Again, old wood bloom. This summer, flower bud, flower bud, flower bud. All these tips will develop my flower buds. So if I go out and prune this too late next winter and I head it back, I'm cutting off on my bloom. So this is one, again, if you're going to prune your lilacs, right now is it. Get out there and do the pruning on a lot of that spring. Quince, same exact story. Forsythia, magnolias. I mean, we can go on and on of all those plants that we just enjoy the flower on. If we have to prune or are going to prune, this is the time to do it, because I need the summer to regrow, harden off the wood, and then I have my flower bud to enjoy the next season, because those are all old wood plants. We looked at spirea, potentilla, some of those old-fashioned shrubs, the opposite, where again, I could do what I want to it and it blooms immediately, kind of thing. Okay?
Smoke bush.
Yeah.
Yeah, I used to prune mine like crazy
Yep.
every summer, and I complaining because it never got smoke on
The
it.
flowers, yeah,
So
exactly.
somebody told me,
Don't prune
"Blooms
it."
on old wood.
Exactly.
So I quit. I got smoke all over it
Yeah,
this
yeah,
year.
yeah.
So if I cut those off this year,
Yeah. Still have plenty of old wood for next year. Absolutely. Yeah, you'll see bloom
Okay.
again. See, and that's I think the smoke tree, anybody else got smoke trees here? I mean, I think that's a great example of your options as a gardener because, you know, again, I call it smoke bush, you say smoke tree. I can prune it back and have a beautiful foliage plant with lovely gold or dark purple foliage. That's what I wanted in my yard. I didn't care as much about the puffy smoke bloom. It's up to you what you want to do. If you prune it, I'm going to have a smaller, beautiful foliage plant, turns great color in the fall, still worthwhile in the landscape. She discovered, like many, well, okay, I'm shearing it every year and I got a nice plant, but where's all my flowers? And I do want that bloom. Okay, well, we have to put the pruners away, not prune it back as hard, let that thing develop some shape, get our flower buds, and then we can prune after bloom again.
So, but then it gets, when I've been cutting it back, because it gets these long.
Oh yeah,
whips.
super long whips, and that's kind of how smoke tree grows. So we could take those, don't cut them all the way off, maybe cut them in half. Because if I should have brought a smoke tree in here, because if I look at a piece of wood, smoke tree has got buds all over the place. So I don't really care where you prune it. You could have a bare piece of wood out the top. You're going to see foliage pop out, and off we go again.
So if I cut it back now, then what's going to grow the rest of the summer? It's going to produce flowers.
Exactly. Now I've got enough time to regrow. I've got my 1-year-old wood, and then I still get my flower next year. Yeah. If I go out in January, not going to hurt my plant again, but I probably cut off a lot of the old wood so no bloom. Yeah, exactly. Yes.
So, what I think is finally getting into my head is that old wood
Yep.
means wood that had some good time
This season to grow.
before winter.
Exactly.
And new wood is stuff that grows
Immediately.
next year after.
Exactly. Yeah.
So as long as I prune stuff back,
Yeah.
like in the next few weeks,
Yeah.
then anything that grows in after
That-
is
that-
still,
that-
that's going to be old wood.
Yep,
but
that's my
not-
reward for 2025. Exactly.
Thank you very
So
much.
like one plant, maybe some. Anybody have forsythias? You know, that's always to me a really easy example. So we go press the rewind button, and we go all the way back to February. Okay, why do I want forsythia? Because I want to come home when nothing else is doing anything in my yard and go, I love yellow. Look at that thing in flower, right? What happens if I don't prune forsythia? Be honest. It's growing through the roof. It's growing here. It's doing whatever it wants to. It's taking over my yard. So that to me is a great example of a plant. I want it for the flower. Probably maybe not the most attractive looking specimen, you know, during the growing season. But if I let it bloom and I cut it all the way down, okay, all the wood that comes out, it'll shoot out 2-3 feet. There's my wood. I leave it alone. Next year, guess what I got? Yellow flower and yellow flower and yellow flower. And then I cut it back again. And the next year I got yellow flower and yellow flower. So again, it's up to you how you want to control it. But if you've seen old forsythia, you know, again, I like all plants. I'm not griping on forsythia, but it's kind of a rangy, wild, do what I want to do garden plant. I'm maybe a little more tidy OCD than that. So if that was my forsythia, I probably wouldn't have one. But because I can prune it, and I know that it will respond with the bloom again next year, that's another, to me, that's an easy example that everybody sees around. Not much else in color. Quince is kind of the same way. Beautiful flowers on bare wood. I'm not going to let my quince, I can show you the quince on the city bank by my house, and it's probably meandered its way through and re-rooted about 20 feet across and about 8 feet tall. That's too much for my yard. I could have easily cut that back every year and had myself a little 3-4 foot plant with plenty of flower on it. Yes?
So I can cut all the things down, round out.
Cut it down, or even leave, like if you've got some nice looking wood, you know, leave little stubs, because again, I leave one, it buds out 2 or 3, and I've got a little bit more bloom again next year. Yeah. But I've seen forsythia absolute break of the 1/3 rule. How's that? You can do what you want to it. Yes?
When you were talking about lavender, it brought to mind my rosemary,
Yep, yep.
and I'm wondering if that's similar.
Very similar. So rosemary, the problem is sometimes hardiness, to be frank. We get a cold winter. They would need to be pruned coming out of winter either way. The problem with rosemary is that's when it blooms, is right at the end of winter. So that's kind of, okay, it looks okay, let's let it bloom, and then we cut it back. You know, or we can cut it back, we still get, you know, it depends on, again, why am I growing the rosemary? Do I want it for culinary use? I like the fragrance. Then who cares about the flower? Absolutely cut that thing back coming out of winter. I've got the freshest, healthiest growth to enjoy all spring, summer, fall.
And if I let it go too long, then I have to cut it back into wood.
Exactly. No bare wood. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
we got to avoid the bare wood pruning. That's all. Then I'm always probably into that one. I don't think you'll get to come back. Some plants will, but that one probably
That's
not.
what I thought.
Yeah. Yes.
When the dogwoods finish blooming,
Yep.
how do we cut them for shape and
So same thing. We talked about, we kind of threw it out there earlier. Crabapple, flowering plum, flowering cherry, dogwoods. We go on and on. All the beautiful spring blooming trees that we have. Dogwoods are just about done now. If I'm going to prune, I'm going out here and do it in the summer. Now it doesn't mean, those types of trees typically don't have a central leader. We talked about the conifer. We don't top it. I'm not topping a shade tree because I want that structure on there. Those are trees, and Japanese maples are kind of the same. We tend to have that vase shape where it fans out and gives us some structure that way. So topping it isn't the end of the world. I'm not saying go home and top your tree, but it's not the end of the world. If you're gonna cut it back and I wanna head it back and keep it lower, that's probably when you do that right now in early summer, because if I do that in the winter time, you cut off your flower buds. So if I'm looking at an old dogwood tree, cherry, any of this stuff that we're talking about, again, I'm staring into the middle first. And I'm going, how congested are we? I got cross branches, whatever. I can clean out that crown by thinning it out very easily. Then I can stand back and go, okay, it's a little bit out of whack. Let's get this side cut back some, get that side come back some, or maybe what you're asking, I can cut the whole thing back, absolutely, but I'm not just gonna walk in and chainsaw it off on all the trunks. I'm going to try to find places where I've already got side branching that'll recover and give me some decent shape back. Okay. Yes.
On a much smaller scale, I have a ground cover. I think it's just sedum.
Yep.
Along a walkway.
Yep.
It's flowering. I don't think I want that. It's too rangy.
Okay.
Just pinch it. If I
Pinch
pull
it back.
the whole thing
Sedum pops out. But yeah, you could grab some snips or pruners and cut back sedum pretty heavily. Yeah. Maybe let the bees have their fun here for a couple of weeks on the flowers, and then have at it. There you go. Yes.
Red stick dogwood, red twig dogwood.
Okay.
The deer have removed most of the leaves.
They pruned it for you.
No, they just took the leaves.
They leave you a bill. That's the
I
question.
I got sticks. Can I cut that back?
Yeah, you can cut twig dogwood back. So I have twig dogwoods is always kind of one that's really up to what you want to do. I have them in my yard. I've got quite a few in my yard. I wanted some to get up and tall that I can see above the garden. I've got other ones that I wanted to keep a little lower. I can head shear those if I want, or again, if I pull the one I brought in, this is a plant that responds pretty quick to pruning. I mean, I could go along here and take these stems back if I want to control the height. I could cut all the stems back and I'd have a lower, thicker plant for sure.
Okay,
And I can always dig into the middle and pull any dead wood out, anything that's crossing, and open it up a little bit as
But
well.
it doesn't have.
But if every leaf was gone,
Oh, but you'll see, it'll leaf right back
so
out.
it's okay
Yeah,
to do it even
yeah.
though.
I might even wait a couple weeks on yours, because you're going to see it start budding out, and then you can go back and just take the pieces of wood out that the deer didn't take for you. Yeah, do it that way. Tell them to be nicer next time. It's like the rabbit in my yard. It's like, eat away at the grass all you want, but can you just cut it evenly, please?
I'll bring one to the next class.
something like Ceanothus, California lilac.
Okay, so there's a great question. Everybody got Ceanothus, which probably this winter got a little nipped, I think. So that's a plant that, again, blooms on new wood, believe it or not. So that, like Abelia, like some of the stuff that blooms on new wood or later in the end of the summer, we would cut back a little bit coming out of winter. So it probably removes a little bit of your damage. If you haven't yet, absolutely still do it. With the warming up now, you're going to see that get going again pretty quickly. Yeah.
Is it safe to prune? It's almost done blooming now.
Yeah.
You can shape it.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I drove by some house in Everett the other day. It was like, wow, that's sharp. She had a perfect little 4-foot rectangle of Ceanothus, and I was like, that's a lucky one because it had no dieback. It was just full of blue. Yeah, really pretty. But you could tell, again, coming out of winter, light clipping. She probably lets it bloom. One more light little clipping, and it keeps it into a nice little hedge that way. Yeah. Yes.
Lilacs, I have like 25-year-old ones.
Oh, yeah.
That are almost
That's
like
me.
Trees,
Yeah.
but they didn't really get many blooms this year. Do I
Yeah.
need to bring them down? Do I need to let the suckers come up and fill in for the?
Well, I think that's probably a little bit up to you. I try not to let the suckers fill in on all mine because I have plenty of them. Trust me. if it didn't bloom as heavy this year, again, that's an old wood plant, so it's not about the winter, it's about what happened last summer. So I would go back, well, you know, just on a side note with lilac, that's one of the few shrubs around here that like sweet soil, not acidic. So I've learned over the years, when I lime my lawn for moss to raise my pH a little bit, lilacs all get limed. So that's a March, spring, fall thing for me. So if we sweeten the soil, that will help a little bit. And absolutely some food on it right now will help you flower bud set. So it probably was 6-7 years ago for me, I discovered, we carry it here from E.B. Stone, it's called Ultra Bloom. Okay, so it's nothing about leaves, it's nothing about new growth, it's not no nitrogen in it, it's pure phosphorus potassium. And once I bought a bag of that now every summer, and I'm not too careful, I'm not worried about burning, I don't have a measuring cup, I take a handful, and I start throwing underneath my rhodies, my lilacs, magnolia, dogwood, everything that I want more flower than next year, that goes on right now. Because now I've got that extra phosphorus, potassium in the soil, that's what's going to get me my flower bud set in the summer that I get to enjoy the next year. Does that make sense? So if I feed it and I make sure it doesn't get drought stressed at all. Lilac's very drought tolerant. I'm not saying to walk out, water it once a day, that's not what I'm saying. But we get warm in the summer at some point. Everyone would agree on that. And we also get very dry for about 3 months. Maybe this year it's only 2, but we do get dry at some point. Those are the times of year I gotta put a little water on it. Your plants, if I'm a lilac and I start to get drought stressed, the first thing I'm gonna do is abort flower production. So okay, I'm gonna chill here, conserve my energy, forget about the buds that you wanted. And the next thing I'm going to do is go dormant early. And I've had that happen on some of mine in August before. Like, ooh, should have got a little more water there in the corner because it's already starting to turn yellow and turn for fall and go dormant because it's trying to preserve itself for the next season. Okay? So food on it. If you're going to prune it again, this is the time of year to do it because of, especially with lilac. Where'd my lilac go? He's over hiding. You know, if I had, again, I could look at this. This is one from the National Arboretum. This got beautiful little touch of purple on the growth too. But I had a flower on every single one of these junctions here a month, 6 weeks ago. And you can see we didn't prune it. Now I got 3 stems up. Every one of these will set a flower bud this summer if I take care of it. Okay?
So in terms of fertilizer for rhodies and azaleas right now, is it better to use something like that Ultra Bloom that has no nitrogen?
Yeah.
Or instead
I put both.
Rhodies?
I put both down, to be honest with you. And it's not, again, I'm not doing this 5 times a year.
No, but
I
twice.
feed in March, I feed in June with the rhodie food, and as an extra thing I discovered, I throw some extra Ultra Bloom underneath those plants. Yeah, I mean, again, I'll use me as an example. You know, modern rhododendrons, there's some great varieties. We could talk Seaview Sunset, Star Bright Champagne, Honey Butter, I could go on and on. Spectacular flowers. But if you ask me, they're some of the heaviest feeders. Pomegranate Splash, another one. Some of the heaviest feeding plants. So for me, I've got one of the original Seaview Sunsets in my backyard. It's spectacular. Just about eye level. It's a little wider. It's a beautiful foundation plant in my own landscape. The years that I didn't feed it with Ultra Bloom, I got a flower, I got a flower, I got a flower. Now that I do this every year, I have solid color. Every single branch has got a bud on it, and I've got maximum flower, which is why we want it, right? We want to see that bloom in the spring.
So just a handful of
Daphne and Adora.
Yep.
One was really big and bushy.
Yep.
This year I'm getting just their skin sticking
Yep.
out.
So Daphne's back to a little bit the way the winter went. I know mine got nipped a little bit, so probably some cold damage. The Daphne is a little different for us in that it doesn't like wet. So that will let you know pretty well. It's not the rain, but we got to have good drainage. And if we've got clay, then we usually have issues with Daphne after a couple years on the ground. So those typically, you know, most Daphne that people have bloom late winter. You know, we got the winter Daphne, comes out, smells delicious February into March. So again, right when it's done blooming, that's when I'm going to tip it back a little bit. If you haven't, it's not too late at all. So do that, put some food on it. I think it'll look a lot better here this summer. Now I have a different one called Eternal Fragrance. Anyone got that one? So that's one that blooms like 8 or 9 months off and on the entire season. And that's been a tough one for me because every time I want to prune, I'm like, well, wait, I got flowers on there again. So I don't prune it very often, but typically when I choose to, it's coming out of winter. I sacrifice a little bit of that early bloom, let it regrow, and then off we go for the summer and the fall. Okay. Yep. So we got, yes, go ahead.
We have a boxwood hedge,
Mm-hmm.
and accidentally took a divot out of it.
Okay.
Will that fill in, or is that just going to be there forever?
I wouldn't give up on it yet. I watched my neighbor probably 3-4 years ago with an old English boxwood, like 8-foot tall hedge, prune it way too far, like literally 50% dead wood and a little bit of foliage sticking out. And I thought to myself, there's no way that's ever coming back. And it wasn't the next year, it got a little better. The next year it got even better, and now I can't even tell. So it will probably happen, but you're gonna have to be patient a little bit. Yeah. So we'll do some more questions, but just before you head out, so just a reminder, if you want to do any shopping, this is always a popular choice, the sharpening tool. But if you need some fresh weapons for the pruning arsenal, grab them in the store. Just tell me about the class, and you got 20% on all that stuff today too. So.
Does that work all week or just today?
You know what? You always see. I can't get used to the new class versus the old class because we tape them. It's all week. So you got through Friday. Yeah, the sale will go all the way through Friday. Okay. So you got any more? There's lots more plants we could talk about. Who else has got questions? Yes.
Not orange.
Yep.
It won't bloom.
Okay. Like you haven't had any bloom this spring at all?
No.
That's one I saw a lot of this year. You know, is it the deciduous one, I'm guessing, the old-fashioned mock orange, kind of archy habit? Or is it the evergreen, like Mexican orange? So deciduous, no leaves in the winter. So try the same thing, because that's another old wood plant. Snowball, all the viburnums, all that stuff. Old wood plant. So try that, my trick with Ultra Bloom this summer. Keep it watered, feed it right now, throw some Ultra Bloom out there, and I bet your bud set will change substantially when we get coming into next winter. Okay, and don't prune out in the winter. That's another great example. I think winter, I got to go tidy up all my deciduous plants, which is kind of always the gardening mantra for the winter months. If I cut that back, I cut off all my flowers. So let it come out in the spring. Do its, because they should be in bloom like right now. Yeah, usually it's mid-May to kind of end of June. Yes. Yeah, which one? Camellia. Okay. Yeah. Scale it down. So camellia is a lot like our rhododendron azalea thing. If it's a winter blooming one, don't cut it in the middle of winter after it's done blooming. Wait till coming out of winter, and it would be the same for your Japanese style, the spring blooming ones. So right when we're done flowering, we can cut that back. Put some food on it for sure. I try not to get into a lot of bare wood. That's going to be the problem with the camellias. You got to kind of stay out towards the tips, but you could absolutely get it back a little bit for sure. Yeah. Yes.
When do you prune the viburnum Davidii?
So anything, again, evergreen, coming out of winter, if you care about the flower, you probably wait until it blooms. But that's a plant, everyone know viburnum Davidii is what he asked about. So we kind of have evergreen leaves, we got a little white flower here, and then we get the blue berries on it. So that's going to be the problem, is if I prune, I'm cool with no berries or bloom maybe this year, it'll be back in next year kind of thing. Or maybe not cut the whole thing back, but be a little more selective so we still get a little bit of bloom and a little bit of berry on it.
How come
But
you don't get berries?
Maybe you didn't get pollinated, perhaps. They usually get a little blue berry on it. Sometimes they do to get pollinated, but it should get a little berry on there too. But that's enough. Anything evergreen, we got, say April 1st, all the way through spring, early summer, till maybe August. Okay, that's my interval to do anything evergreen. Now, if it blooms, we're gonna wait till after flower. If it flowers late, we don't do it quite that early, like I talked about. But that's gonna be your interval to safety. I don't want to wait till September, October, November, or over the winter and cut back the evergreen stuff. We want to get that done in the season here. Yeah. Yeah.
So would beautyberry be something like the third?
Exactly. So beautyberry is one that would bloom in the summer. So if I'm going to clean up my beautyberry, I can do that a little bit in the winter, or I can do it first thing in spring, and I can open it up, I can tidy it back, but I'm probably not going to cut it back super hard, or I'll sacrifice a lot of the bloom and the berries. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
When you feed, does it go under the mulch, on top of the mulch?
Well, ideally, if you can put it under the mulch, that's fine. But as long as you can water it in, I mean, my whole yard's composted, and I'm not crawling underneath every rhodie and moving all the mulch and putting it down and recovering it. As long as I can broadcast it on there and water it in or let Mother Nature do it, you'll be fine.
So what's the best time of year to apply new mulch? If you're going to put a little bit more mulch every year?
Well, to me, it's always spring. You can do it any time, so let's start with that. But the best time to me is probably usually spring, or sometimes going into the winter and the fall. Spring would probably be my first choice, because typically if I had compost in my yard, I'm going to walk out in February, March, get everything fertilized, and then I could just mulch over the entire thing, and off we go for the season. Yeah. Plus, hopefully, suppress some weeds too. Yeah. Yes.
Barberry.
Mm-hmm.
I've got too many, but on my front walkway we have 3. They're too large, and I don't want to just form them into a ball.
Okay.
What do you do with them?
Well, barberries. Okay, so barberry is one that blooms in the spring. I don't think most people care if they're barberry blooms. I do, so I don't cut mine back. I think they have really pretty yellow flowers on bare wood in like March. So I don't cut mine back that hard. But if you don't care about the bloom, I could clip those back really hard coming out of winter. If you haven't done it, you could still do that now. Now, if I use hedge shears, I'm going to end up with a ball.
I know.
So if you want to be a little bit more structure to it, try the hand pruners again. And it's like a piece here, and a piece there, and a piece there, and then I'll kind of get a little bit more natural look, which is usually what I do to mine.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
So with the rhodie, I have about an 8-foot rhodie.
Yep.
It's a shrub. I took a third, I kind of controlled it, so it's about that every year.
Yeah.
If I want to go up underneath to make it, can I just go up
as
far as I want?
Yeah, start at the bottom, and again, we're not leaving stubs of branches. Right. Cut those clean off. You're going to see this year, probably for a couple years, you're going to see leaves trying to recover on that old trunk. They can be pinched off real easy. But you'll end up with me. I mean, I think it's one of the prettiest plants in my whole yard. A 50-year-old rhodie, with beautiful twisting trunk that's been limbed up. I can walk underneath it, and there's an entire garden underneath there.
And you can do all that in 1 year.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, that's just going to redirect all that energy into what you want to keep.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Got pruning overload. Everyone's ready to go home. Get the chainsaw and the stick out. Start. No, I'm just kidding. Cut everything. So, you can always call with questions. Always bring down a picture like, I got this. What is it? When do I prune it? Not just me, but a lot of our staff will be able to give you a hand kind of on the proper timing on how to do this. Because again, some of this is winter, some of it's spring, some of it's summer. It's a lot nicer weather usually in the summer to get some of this done when we're not out in the pouring rain in January and February. There's other things we have to do late winter, like fruit and berries and other stuff, but we can certainly get a lot of this done early summer as well. So I appreciate you coming in.